Okay, we should be live. I have also my YouTube here open. Okay, we are live. So I might say just one thing in Italian first, just to, and then let you introduce yourself in English, and we're gonna keep going in English, and I'll work with the subtitle later. Quindi, ciao ragazzi, siamo qua. Come vi ho promesso vi porto il mio coach per chiacchierare un pochino di come programmare per diventare più forti e grossi. Parleremo in inglese perché lui viene dal Canada e quindi è la lingua con cui noi comunichiamo solitamente. Nei prossimi giorni metterò i sottotitoli. Chi di voi è interessato già ora a vedere il video potete seguirci, se sapete l'inglese è meglio. And I just figured that we are on private, so no one can see us except for me. Let me fix it. Okay. Now everyone can see us.
Okay.
Perfect.
That's
my fault.
No worries.
Okay, so introduce yourself.
So hi everyone, my name is Jason Tremblay. I am the president and co-founder of The Strength Guys. I am also Filippo's coach. I've visited Italy once before, and I'm friends with Carlo Buzzicelli. Together we went to the, I believe it was 2016 Italian Raw Powerlifting Nationals, which was held in Parma. I was really impressed by the Italian powerlifting community, and I've kept in touch with Carlo ever since my travels. And so it's always been something that I've had a distant interest in. So I'm really glad to be on the podcast here with Filippo today. And yeah.
We are very, very pleased to have you here and have someone that have achieved so much here, because you have very, very strong athletes. If you want to talk to us about your athletes and your achievement, we will be pleased to hear.
Okay. Sometimes it's a little bit uncomfortable just listening.
Yeah.
Just coach 2 Asian champions and 2 best lifters of the Asian Championship, 2 Canadian national champions, 4 American national champions, 2 Arnold Classic champions, and 3 University World Cup champion college teams. I've also worked with, well, I coached the North American champion, and we're currently working with the European powerlifting champion in the 83 kilo weight division as well.
Perfect.
And as far as education goes, I am 25 years old. I have a previous university education in personal fitness training. Shortly after that, we started the business, started coaching, and I have 1 more year left on my bachelor's degree in physical education. So.
Perfect. And hopefully you're going to have also a world champion soon under your belt.
Hopefully. That's we'll cross that bridge when we get there.
Yeah. So the main reason we're doing this live is to talk about how to program in order to get stronger and bigger. So can we start from the main mistakes that people does when they try to become stronger and bigger? And I'm one of those who did many mistakes. We talk about it. I used to cut too often, too much. I used to do too much accessory work and not enough specific work. So can you take on from here?
Okay. So I think the hard part about this idea is that we all want the same thing, but everyone comes from a different place of seeing how to gain strength. And so I can only comment to really what I've seen from the coaches we work with, and also my own experiences. So like you, I've found myself at one point in time writing training programs with a lot of assistance work and a lot of very short-term thinking of what will work in the next 4 weeks or 6 weeks. and looking at training in isolated blocks of time like that. And over time, I've learned that that will work to a very specific level where you can basically do whatever when you are new, and you will gain muscle and get stronger so long as your plan is decent enough. But then there will come a time where your gains will level off and you will need to fine tune further. And so I think that's when it becomes essential to dive into how do I fine tune and optimize training to tap into my final bits of potential that I have. And when you do that, you need data and you need objectivity. And so I think that you can no longer go by feel. So I'd say that the number one mistake which strength and conditioning coaches or powerlifting coaches make is that training load, which is the foundation of all periodization literature. We talk about how much load did you do? Did the athlete do a very high load, a very low load, anywhere in between for the week? That training load, it should not be a theoretical consideration. You should be able to objectively answer, I did this many kilograms for this lift in week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4. And you should have that data on hand, because I think that it's incredibly important when you look at progressive overload. Do you have any questions based off of that, or do you want me to?
Yeah, I know. Like, there are some coaches that work on kgs, so tons of work you did for each lift. There is some others that work with sets, with the amount of working sets or the amount of working reps. Do you use just the tons that you lift on each lift, or you use like all three informations, or just like sometimes one or sometimes another? Maybe physical athlete, the series, they do the sets, they do, sorry, because in Italian you say series. The sets you do for each body part, and for a power lifter you use kgs. How do you work like that?
Yeah, so I'm actually going to share my screen, and I hope this pops up. And I'm, since I'm coaching you and since I'm on your YouTube channel, I will show people your data. So this is what I look at when I look at your 3 main lifts. So primarily what I'm concerned about are predicted volume and relative intensity.
Okay.
Relative intensity is calculated by dividing up the total volume of the week by the number of lifts that you did by the 1 rep max. And then volume is calculated by multiplying out sets times reps times the weight you lifted. Okay?
Yeah.
And I look at relative intensity and volume on your squat and your bench press and your deadlift, and then also your total.
Okay.
And what I look for is, I'm just going to create a very rudimentary graph here. So this is the training that we've done thus far, Filippo. I'll make it a little bit bigger. And based off of research and our own experience, we know that volume is the main driver of strength and muscle gain. And based off of, really hundreds and thousands of years of strength training anecdote, we know that progressive overload must occur in order for strength gain to happen and muscle gain. And so a macro cycle has a very distinct structure where you will start with high volume, and then as you move towards the powerlifting meet at the end of the macro cycle, you will peak with lower volumes and higher intensities. And we like to challenge that paradigm because we think that volume is very, very essential to gaining and maintaining strength. But the issue that a lot of people run into when they write powerlifting programs, where is the sound okay?
Yeah. It's the office phone. Sorry.
Okay.
I'm gonna turn it off. Keep going.
Okay.
Sorry.
The issue that many people run into unknowingly with their programs is, if I were not viewing Filippo's data and I wanted to give him a volume phase, but let's say the most amount of volume he had ever done in a week was here, and I unknowingly only wrote his volume to peak here, I would not actually be giving Filippo a program which overloaded his system, okay? So it wouldn't be a stimulus which would cause much strain unless the relative intensity was very high. And so basically I would be giving him an ineffective program. And so thus far, we've been working together for 13 weeks now. You could see that in phase 1, we built him up to 25,000 pounds, just over, on squat volume in the final week. And then we tested him here, and he increased his strength immensely. And so in phase 2, we built him up again, this time to 32,500 pounds, and we tested him, and he gained even more strength, right? So his performance has increased. And that's the first step of our meet prep, is increasing the volume. And because I look at your data, Filippo, I know that before I send you a training program, I am accomplishing my objective of reaching a new level of volume in this stage and in this stage. And if you don't know how much you're doing, if you don't know how much training load you have, you will never be able to answer the question of, is this training program providing me with progressive overload or not? Because you just don't know the big picture of the data.
And this is the first different thing from what I'm used to see before working with you, what I was used to see, because usually when you're in the intensification phase, the usual intensification phase, if we have a block periodization, usually even there, the volume drops and the intensity rises, or the volume stays the same and the intensity rises over time. This is the first time I have like a set, let's say set jump in intensity, and then I grow in volume over time. And that drove me a lot of gains, both in strength and size. But it's the very first time I do something like this. So it's very, very interesting, giving volume, like watching at volume as the main factor, I don't know how to say it, sorry, in strength. Usually it's not like this. Like even in Italy, most of the coaches, they focus more on intensity rather than volume for strength gains. And just like the bodybuilders look at volume, let's say, like most of powerlifters think this, like bodybuilders should look at volume, we should look at intensity. But you work a lot with volume and you vary the intensity to, it's like you use intensity to select the kind of adaptment you want, and you use volume to select the size of the adaptment you want to achieve. I don't know if I said it right in English.
It's correct to, so volume is the main thing, but right now you are in a transition period, so we are no longer doing that high of volume. Like
Sure.
Height of volume for the rest of the prep, where the main variable which I'm changing now is your intensity, right?
Yeah, sure.
All you were doing, same load for 4 weeks, same load for 6 weeks, and now we're in a place where the volume is kept lower and the intensity is going up, so that we can work our way towards a peak. And I think this highlights the second thing with programming, which is that if you only look at your training in short periods of time, not like the entire 16-week meet prep, where I know that 1 week out I have to be able to do 95%, like my second attempt or so.
Yeah.
I have to be able to do it really well so I could plan a good strategy. Literally, our intensity is preparing you gradually each week for that. We may have a dip here and there to recover a little bit or what have you, but we are working up to, I know on competition day, I want to be able to do like 100% or 105% or whatever. And so we have to work our intensity up along that way, but we have to use volume to gain strength in order to be able to do it. And that's how I view it. Other coaches will view it differently.
Sure.
But for me and for Ben Esgro and Chad Dolan and Alfred and Taylor and John and Kedrick and our entire staff, that's how we look at the stuff, is that bigger picture, like the entire meet prep, and really what are we trying to accomplish here? And then we drill down towards that.
Yeah, it's really interesting and is working a lot for me. Another thing you did for me, like in my own case, is like I had one lift that was going slower than the other. You changed frequency. You did for so that I could be able to do more volume, but also more practice, right?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So we have some assessment weeks, like where I do some tests. How do you choose how to change the program based on those tests?
Yeah. So once I have data on you and how you do in rep maxes at certain percentages or certain loads, I now can compare and say, okay, you did your 5 rep max of, I will actually look at this. So when we started, your 8 rep max on squat was 315 pounds, so 142.5 kilos. And that was on March 24th that you did that. And on May 11th, you did 152.5 kilos for 8 reps. So I could say, okay, cool. Our 8 rep max has gone up by 10 kilos, right?
Yeah.
So it's a very objective, okay, he has gotten stronger. Therefore, we can no longer train off of the same 1 rep maximum that we were when you 315 pounds was your 8 rep max, right? So I've increased your projection, right? That now your training 1 rep max is set at, can we disclose this information?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Your training 1 rep max is set at 182.5 or 185 kilograms, right? So, and basically your performances showed me that you were ready for that. Now, conversely, if you start doing poorly on evaluations or in your training, I will lower that, right? And so we will arrive at meet day with a training 1 rep max, which I have raised when you performed well, and which I have dropped when you have performed poorly, and we will use that to plan our attempts.
Yeah, so you have a better knowledge about what I'm really capable of.
Yeah, and our goal right now is to try to fine tune that as much as possible, especially when you get to the world championship level. Like our perfect day as a coach is for a lifter to go 9 of 9 and to achieve their projections that we have based off of what I've just explained exactly on competition day, and to make them look easy,
Yeah.
So like at the Arnold Classic, I think Sean Moser ended up being a total of 5 kilograms off from our projections. And Taylor ended up being 2.5 kilograms off from our projections, and both went 9 of 9. So that's our goal, is to be 0 kilos off and 9 of 9, because that's when you will post the highest total.
And one thing that I was curious about watching your programming for me is you use those AMRAP tests also to test how long or how low in volume you should go during tapering phases or during peaks. Like I tested it. I don't know if I can say it. Can I talk about my program like precisely?
Yeah.
Okay. I used to test during a taper week. So the thing that popped in my mind is maybe we're doing this also to gauge how long I should taper or how lower in volume I should go during tapering, because we're testing performance during a taper as we will do going into a meet. So that was what popped in my mind.
So this is something that I learned from Ben Asgrow, and Ben will say often to the lifters which we coach together, and it's important to mention that we coach together, Ben and I, is that he will say it doesn't matter how you feel in training. All that matters is that you feel like a god on meet day, right?
Yeah.
And so that means that like whenever we test in training, you don't have to feel amazing to test. Like all that we want to see is where you are at currently in training. We don't want to see it under perfect conditions or anything like that. We will save the final taper and like final fine tuning. Everything that we do is for the meet day, fine tuning from the beginning, and then we display the full result on meet day. So training is just a test. It's not about being a perfect test. It's just about where are you right now.
Yeah, this is very, very close to what I used to do when I was an MMA pro fighter. Like my coach used to say pretty much the same thing. If your training is really rough, then the match is gonna be easier. That's and one thing that I'm really glad about working together, working with you, is that I feel a little bit like an athlete again, as I told you. Like most of the people think that powerlifter are just fat guys that has to move heavy stuff around. But how you program, how you also how you program my warm-ups before going into the workout and everything makes me feel like an athlete again, because I know like I have to be able to move well, I have to be well conditioned and everything, so that I can do the workout and I can gain the strength from the workout. So you work with athletes too, right?
Yeah. So I interned under Brett Bartholomew, who's a strength and conditioning coach based out of Atlanta. I interned under Brett Bartholomew for 4.5 months. And then I worked with Brett Bartholomew in an ongoing capacity for 1.5 years. And I've also interned under Dan Noble at the Hill Academy, which is one of Canada's top hockey and lacrosse academies, which is based outside of Toronto. So I've had a few experiences in strength and conditioning. Nothing like in powerlifting, but I think that the good thing about venturing out and learning from great minds like Brett and Dan is that you could see what else is out there in the world of training and what are athletes like yourself doing, right?
Yeah.
And then I can look at powerlifting and say that, perhaps this doesn't make you stronger or anything, but perhaps it improves our movement quality for the workout. Here's a really thorough and comprehensive 7-minute warm-up, that Brett trains UFC fighters and NFL players, pro hockey players, and military personnel. Here's what they would do, right, to get ready for a workout. And to bring some of that, not all of it, because powerlifters don't need to do the plyometrics and the sprinting and conditioning like athletes do, but to bring some of that over into powerlifting. And I think like I've gotten so much positive feedback from our warm-ups, from you and from other lifters, that like, hey, like those bands are key, or the world's greatest stretch is key.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, you are prepared to work now, right?
And I can see it like right off, like after a couple of weeks, I was almost as flexible, if I can say, if I can use this word, as I was when I was fighting. So it was very fast. I got better very fast, and also like all the movements that you use to like teach how to use the glutes are very effective in both squat and deadlift. Like I can feel I can move better right now. I don't have the perfect technique, but I can move much better, and I have much more control. So it's very, very good. And one thing, there's one guy that's listening that asked one question. He said, like, I did an AMRAP test and I'm pretty close to my competition. He said, isn't it too taxing compared to a sub-maximal test? Like a single at RP 8 or 9 wouldn't be less taxing? Is it the way to say it? Taxing for my SNC, and will it be like better to gauge my strength level?
Okay, so what we use AMRAPs for near a competition is typically 3 weeks out. We will evaluate based off of our training when we're at maximum. I'm not going to disclose all of the protocol, but
sure.
How many reps can you do with what we think your opener will be after you have done singles with your opener, not before, after. And we look at the singles and the evaluation, and then we meet and we look at the athlete's data and we say, this is good, or they are ahead of schedule. We can raise the projection for the meet, or this was bad. We need to lower the projection for the meet. Well, not bad, poor. So that way, we reduce the risk of having an athlete bomb because we have done numerous singles with an opener. We have done an evaluation with the opener. We have adjusted the training when we're at maximum if it needed to be adjusted. And then the next week, we practice seconds with the higher intensity based off of the adjusted when we're at maximum. And so a lot of people will go into competitions wondering, is my opener going to be good on meet day, or is my second attempt going to be good on meet day? But for someone like Taylor, he, like on squat alone, did 12 singles and then one evaluation, leading into the Arnold Classic with it combined his opener and his second attempt. So we knew that going in, this weight was going to be good for him, and that our strategy was 6 out of 9 lifts had already been confirmed. We were good. We were at body weight. He can do all of this. And we had adjusted the projection based off of that. And so we knew with a decent level of confidence that he would be able to hit our projections, right? And this is a system that Ben Escrow introduced to me. And I thought that when he did it, I'm like, that is absolutely genius, because now you're not leaving your meet day performance up to by feel.
This is science. This is pure science, like scientific approach. Like you test, you have data, so you work on that. This is very, very, very good, very interesting. I like it because I'm an engineer. If you talk about data, I'm very happy.
And you would want to know, so long as you are healthy, with confidence, that my opener is going to be good, my second attempt is going to be good, and I know, based off of when I taper and everything like that, that my training when we're at maximum is probably going to be there. Like that's the ideal outcome of going into a meet, is confidence. Because, and this is another thing that Ben would nail home, is you want to be over prepared on meet day. Like you want to have done numerous singles with what you're going to have to do in competition. And as you know, we do back squat, bench press, deadlift. Like we prepare for what is going to be in the competition.
Now I'm used to deadlift fatigued. Before I wasn't. That's very good too.
And I think that you'll notice that you'll have better stamina in your next competition, because you're used to doing high volume workouts of back squat, bench press, deadlift, and now you only have one rep. You have 3 sets and 1 rep on each lift on meet day, right? It's like a taper workout. It's not that bad.
Yeah. I can feel it. Like at first was really rough. I have to be honest. Like deadlift after a heavy squat session was really rough. But
Like,
now I'm used to it and I enjoy it, and I can see how this will lead me to a very, very better meet, because I used to be very fatigued when I went into deadlifts.
yeah, and I think going back to like the theme of the call of programming, that if you only do squat and bench, or squat only, bench only, deadlift only, and you have problems with like energy level on meet day, like this is a very basic thing to look at of why aren't I like just training like my sport, you know?
Yeah. That's
Really,
really true.
the analogy, the comparison, the fighting would be like, I only do 1 round per day, right? And then you get into like a 3-round match and you're like, oh God, like this is tiring, you know? Like,
Yeah.
so it's from a stamina standpoint, it just makes sense to do them all.
Yeah, this is very true. Like if you're not used to do I've seen things like this happen a lot of time in fighting too. Like people used to train, let's say, 3 minutes rounds, but when you go and you fight, like you have 5 minutes rounds.
Yeah.
Another thing, like, is very different. So another thing, like we talked half an hour, let's say, about like programming and how what should I do, what should we do, what should an athlete, a powerlifting athlete, do nutrition wise, because we spoke about some mistakes that many people do, and one of the mistake I feel like was the worst I did was cutting too much weight after a meet. Like I used to have the meet in June, drop down to below 10% body fat, sometimes 12 kilograms or things like this, and then grow back up into my weight class. And I used to lose a lot of strength dieting down. And more than that, I spent like 4 months without gaining any strength, and then I had to gain back all my strength, and I wasn't getting much better or at all doing that.
So this is a really good question. And I'm not the nutrition guy here. We have a certified international sports nutritionist, Kedr Kwan, who's based out of Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia. And we also have a registered dietitian, Ben Esgro, who's based out of Scranton, Pennsylvania. They do the bulk of the nutrition here at the Strength Guys. From a physique standpoint, I don't think, I don't think, Ben will say it doesn't, you know, what you would do to look good and feel good is the same, you know, like the goal in powerlifting, ideally, once your development is near its pinnacle, is to be as muscular as possible and as lean as possible while having a good level of energy. Because that way you could fit into the top of the 74 or the 83 or the 93 kilo weight classes. You can't rush that because it requires a lot of muscle growth over time, and it also requires, you know, good eating habits, protein intake, carbohydrate intake, fat intake, caloric intake overall. The approach that I advocate, or that we advocate, sorry, is to have, in those final 3 weeks, we like people to be at body weight or within a kilo of body weight, because it goes back to our attempt selection strategy of, I want as little confusion as possible when we're laying out an attempt or a strategy, sorry. So if you did your singles of your opener and second attempt at body weight, we'll know on meet day that, okay, like he's not dropping 3 kilos to compete. He did this in training at body weight and it looked good, you know. It's one less barrier which we have to jump around. With that said, there are a few lifters in the IPF who are so good at cutting weight In particular, one of them who owns the World Powerlifting Now Facebook group, who I worked with for a bench press only competition in February, sorry, Jason Manninkoff of the USA. He will cut down from, I believe, 76 kilos, 78, to 74 the week of the competition. And he will make weight, and he will rehydrate himself to the point where he's lifting at 76 or 77 kilos, and he's fine. But that's very rare, and his approach has been fine-tuned over the course of over a decade. So he knows. But for you or I to apply that is very risky.
Yeah, sure. And what about long term? Like, do you feel like someone who powerlifts should stay all year long close to his body weight, like at his I don't know how to say it, body weight of the competition, or should he go higher and then drop down, or drop down and go back up, in order to become, like, to clean up a little bit and become always closer to that limit you said before, like being as muscular and as lean as I can get while stay strong on my weight class?
Yeah. Based off of what I've read in the literature on the importance of a caloric surplus for optimizing muscle gain, I think that it can help, but I wouldn't recommend getting above 1.5 or 2 kilos above your weight class. So kind of like what we're doing right now.
Yeah.
We just, you were 81.5 kilos and we bulked you up to 84 kilos, right? So we're within 1 kilo of making weight. And when it comes time to go through the final phases, we'll have you rate at 83 kilos. It's very simple nutritional intervention.
Sure. And what about, like, are we gonna stay like this? I think I saw, but is not like very studied, let's say, literature, that especially in strength athletes, they tend to stay at the same weight or very close all year round, so close to maintenance, but they get better body composition over time, even though they stay at the very same weight or very close to it. Because a lot of people think that this is not even possible. So what do you think about it?
If you look through research, basically muscle can be gained even if you are in a caloric deficit under certain conditions. These conditions being, like, if you are dieting and you are very new to training, there is well reported in scientific literature, which is peer reviewed, gains of muscle mass. If you have a lot of fat on your body and you are dieting, you could still gain muscle mass. There are reported, this has actually happened, like, it's not debatable. In a maintenance, you can gain muscle mass. In a surplus, you can gain muscle mass, right?
Yeah, sure.
But I think, like, the key to all of that is that it seems to be conditional. This is based off of my reading as well. If you have further questions, I would ask Hedrick or Ben, because they're the guys. But it seems to be very conditional, and I think that obviously if you were very lean and you were very muscular already, maybe it would be harder to gain muscle mass while maintaining.
Yeah.
But if you look at the IPF, like, there's guys who've been in the same weight class for years and who just seem to always get bigger and bigger and bigger, right? I don't really buy into it much that, like, by cutting weight I should lose a lot of strength, or that I won't be able to gain muscle when I'm cutting, only when I'm bulking. I don't subscribe to that train of thought.
Okay, very good. That's very also motivating for most of us. Like, for me, it will be like I'm pleased to stay a little bit higher in body fat in order to perform really well during workouts, getting stronger faster. And if my body gets better over time, I'm very pleased about it. and is growing a lot in Italy. Let's say a fan base of dual athletes that works both for strength and for physique. Do you work with some of those athletes that compete in both?
Yeah, I actually started off as a bodybuilding coach. How I got into powerlifting was originally I was exclusively bodybuilding, drug-free always. But how powerlifting became on my radar was Jeff Nippard signed up, and Jeff said, "I really like your content. I want your help getting stronger." And I explained to Jeff I had never done powerlifting before, but we started doing powerlifting, and Jeff competed, and he really, really liked it. And after 2 competitions, we did Canadian powerlifting nationals, and he won silver, and he had added a ton of kilos to his total. Um, and then from that, in one of my other bodybuilders at the time, Travis Schmitz, was just walking into a gym in rural Minnesota, and he saw Taylor bench pressing, and he said, "Hey, like you'd be really good at powerlifting." And Taylor was like, "What is powerlifting?" He didn't know. And then my client Travis said, "Well, here's the number to my coach. He does some stuff with powerlifters," even though the only powerlifter I was working with at the time was actually a bodybuilder, Jeff Nippard. And Taylor signed up. And that's kind of Jeff and Taylor kind of helped steer me away from bodybuilding more to powerlifting. But I still train drug-free bodybuilders.
Yeah, I've seen a couple of high-level bodybuilders under your training, and that's what was caused the question, let's say, because how do you manage someone that want to do both?
The training principles really don't change that much, honestly. Like a bodybuilder will also want to, like, let's say a bodybuilder's goal is to grow their back. Well, it's going to be hard if, let's say your back is used to, this is a very easy number, 10,000 pounds of volume per week, and you are training at 6,000 pounds of volume per week, and you have no idea how much back work you're doing. It's going to be very hard to overload your back when, you made gains at 10,000 pounds, but now you're only doing 6,000 pounds per week, right? Like,
sure.
So you need to have an idea of what you're doing with your data, and you need to see a gradual increase over time.
So you take you look at pounds even like on accessory work, like, because do you think I know volume is the main factor, but maybe I would think like some movements are heavier than other, like on the response they give back. Like I don't know how to say it in English, like but some are heavier. Like maybe the response I will get on my back doing a very heavy row is different than doing cables for my lats. And even if I equate the volume, maybe the rows give let's say a bigger stimulus. Have you seen something like this?
It could be. I think that would be, so again, like this is that would be like a really good question for like Brad Schoenfeld, or Dr. Brandon Roberts, who's with our group as well. Brandon is on the NSCA panel for natural bodybuilding research. He's a professional natural bodybuilder, and he's a PhD in exercise physiology with a specialty on muscle biology. So like he biopsies and all that, like he knows his stuff. And when we write a program together, because I coach bodybuilding athletes together with Brandon, and when we work together to write a program, Brandon and I will discuss what exercise will be best for the athlete in order to hit a certain muscle group in a certain way. But that's a very small part of the conversation of how can we progress this over time, right?
Yeah.
And I think that like such a big part of it is just progressing it over time. One thing which was very eye-opening for me was a while back I worked with Coach Jeremy Hartman from Indiana. And Jeremy Hartman is a former equipped world champion in the, I believe, 105 kilo division in powerlifting. He's a great deadlifter and a great lifter overall. He's world champion. And Jeremy was coached by Detmar Wolf of Norway.
Yeah.
And he also worked under Louis Simmons when he was younger, because I believe he grew up in Ohio. So he had a different perspective on strength training than what I had ever been exposed to. And we were working together with one of my longtime powerlifting athletes and one of our coaches, John Downing, who's an 83 kilo lifter and who's a junior national champion in the USA. And he was the squat world record or national record holder, until John Hack came around and eclipsed his record. But John needed to gain muscle because he's a smaller 83 kilo lifter. So Jeremy came on. And I guess for whatever reason, oversight or what have you, I got in this habit of only ever prescribing back work at, 4 sets of 10 or 8 or whatever. And Jeremy said, well, no, this needs to grow. Let's do 5 sets. Let's do 6. Let's do 7. And he said that Bill Kazmaier, the world's strongest man, at one point in his career, I don't know whether this is true or not, was probably doing near 100 sets of back work.
This is a lot.
So it's like, holy crap. Like, imagine if I loaded an athlete this much, what would happen to their back? And this is a realization which Ben Esgro had. So one of our recent clients, Gary Amlinger, won his WNBF pro card in very convincing fashion. And what was very interesting is he dieted down and lost a combined 60 pounds before he was stage shape.
Whoa, that's a lot. It's really a lot.
Yeah, it's like nearly 30 kilos, 25 kilos. And he was, as like, you could see the muscles of his hip flexors, like the individual muscles, this is how lean he was. Ben and I experimented. This was Ben's idea. What would happen if we took his volume on his lifts to an all-time high during the diet? So instead of doing cardio for an hour a day, he was training for 2.5 to 3 hours a day, lifting weights. And 2 weeks out from his competition, in spite of losing 25 kilos, he was absolutely, not relatively, he was absolutely the strongest he had ever been in his life. Meaning that his actual, like, regardless of whether he weighed 280 pounds or 210 pounds, the weights he was using were absolutely the highest he had ever used in his life. And so that showed us that even if you are dieting, you should still be able to push the envelope, right? And when Ben, because Ben is also a pro bodybuilder, he said that when he competed the first time, he did a lot of conditioning, and he felt almost emancipated on show day, like just so wasted away, The second time he competed, he lifted a lot. Like, I think he was doing 2-a-days, and he actually had like 15 to 20 Wilks points improvement by the time he was in show shape,
Yeah, that's amazing. Like 50 Wilks points is something that people don't achieve in a year of training sometimes.
Yeah, so I think going back to your question of like, can you gain muscle or strength in a cut? Well, I think if you push it hard enough and you stay healthy, there are undocumented things happening that we see, right? Like Ben and his Wilks points, or with Gary and his absolute strength. And it's like something happened there, but like our mainstream community hasn't seen it enough to say, oh, okay, like you can gain strength cutting, or you can gain strength while or muscle while cutting, because not many people push like that. And I think maybe it is a programming thing, but it's not to say everyone can do that, because obviously Ben has got enough good genetics to win professional bodybuilding. He's got a great physique, and Gary is one of the best in the world at natural bodybuilding already, I think. So they've got genetics on their side, but what will happen when we push, right? And I
Sure.
don't think enough people have pushed. So
About genetics is also like, how can you know if your genetic is good enough or not if you don't push yourself this hard?
and you need to have data in order to push. Otherwise, it's all guessing, right?
Yeah,
So
sure.
this is like the foundation of the approach which we've adopted.
And since like the highest amount of volume one person can tolerate, let's say, is fixed. It's not fixed because over time you get better at tolerating volume. But what I want to say is, like, if there's a guy like the one you talked about that had to add sides to get to become a better power lifter, would you just add work to the back, or would you like drop down a little bit of work from the main lifts, or you're just trying to maybe raise the volume overall to build overall sides also through the main lifts?
So what we did with John after nationals was he decided he wasn't going to compete again for a while. So we were in a very transitional period of training. So we dropped the lifting frequency back to 1 time per week on squat, bench press, deadlift. Keep enough intensity in there so he doesn't detrain a lot, right? But really, we're okay if John's squat decreases by 5 kilos at this point in time, right? Like, he needs to rest his joints and his body and his mind. And yeah, we were doing back like 3 to 4 days a week, like probably above 30, like in between 30 and 40 sets a week. And it's like, well, okay, like it worked, you know. And I talked to Brett Contreras when he was doing a seminar 1 year in Saskatchewan, which is the province to the east of Alberta, which is where I'm located. And I asked Brett, so how many sets per week do you give your competitors who train glutes? Because he's known as the glute guy. And he said, oh man, that's a really good question. He's like, probably 25. And if you think about like 25 sets of glutes per week, this is at least 2 full days, like 2 13-set, 12-set workouts of glutes, right? And it's like, of course you will grow, you know? And if you push that even higher to 3 days per week, what would happen to the glutes, you know? Like, and these are the ideas and experiments which we carry out. What will happen, you know?
Yeah. And about Brett, that's like the biggest hip thrust guy in the world right now. Do you ever use hip thrust for people who has hip extension like issues in squats and deadlift? Like maybe they're very strong in quad strength, but they struggle with hip extension. Would you recommend using like those kind of variation that are quite different from the main movement, but I've seen like from following Brett, that it has some transfer both on squat and deadlift?
Yeah, we prefer, so again, to go back to Ben, we did a podcast with Danny Lennon, who's another strength guys member of our community.
I know him because I went to APC last year, so I met him.
Yeah, so Ben and I are working with Danny, and we did a podcast with him on our co-coaching, which it's linked in my Instagram bio if you'd like to listen to it. And Ben explained that the way we view strength training is, imagine that you walked into a concert and they had drums and guitar and piano and vocals all playing at once. You could appreciate the music, but if it was all going at once, you may not know what is what, right? You may not know what instrument is creating what sound and what is creating that effect. And so it's comparable to strength training, because in strength training, we want to know whether or not our squat, bench press, and deadlift intervention was creating the effect or not. And so our goal is to boil strength training down to as simple as possible to progress, right? So that's why we only do squat, bench press, deadlift for the power lifts. Now, if we have to do some extra stuff for a lockout on bench press, floor press. If we have to teach a positioning thing on deadlift, sometimes we'll do pause deadlift. If we have to strengthen the quadriceps at full depth, one thing I've learned from Dr. Megan Bryanton is like extreme depth. Full range of motion front squats are really good for strengthening quads and deep knee flexion. But those we try to keep out as much as possible. And we just try to manipulate the loads, the intensities, and subsequently the frequency. And I think that approach also carries over to technique. If there's pain or discomfort, we will look at direct ways to fix the technique on the lift. We don't want to do some crazy variation of the back squat or something, because that's not what the sport is, right? Like, it's something you are doing in your deadlift that is causing pain, or in your back squat that is causing pain. And
if you stop doing it, you will never know if the fix you advised worked.
And so even the physical therapists that we work with, Dr. Quinn Hannock of Juggernaut has been amazing for us. I highly recommend him for everyone. Dr. Clinton Lee of Physio Strength in New York City has been amazing for us. Highly recommend him as well. They don't do a bunch of abstract exercises. They treat the main lift. Like, okay, you have pain in this pattern. Like, how can we fix it? And you look at the main lift, because that is the root of the problem. Oftentimes, I'm not a physical therapist as well, but and it's very specific and direct, and that's what we try to do with all of our interventions.
Yeah, this is really cool, because I've seen another thing that is very common is people like trying to go way off the road during powerlifting preps. I was the same kind of person. Like, I thought, like, I have long arms, so I might do a lot of close grip bench press or close grip incline bench press to strengthen my triceps. But right now I'm doing just competition bench press, and I've never gotten this strong this fast ever. So is common sense on other sports is not so much common sense on powerlifting if you look at how people train. Because if you go to a swimmer, he swims to get better at swimming, and powerlifter seems to want to do everything else except to powerlifts.
With that said, I think a lot of respect is also owed to people like Mike Teixeira, who I've never trained with Mike, and I've never had a very long conversation with him about training, but I know from a distance that he prescribes more variations than a lot of, than Ben, Chad, me, anyone on our staff would. And he has very great results and great lifters as well. Yeah. So I don't want to say that our way is, the way is our way. And people like Mike Teixeira, like, they obviously get brilliant results as well. Sure. Like, so there is that way, but like, I just think this is the way we prefer.
Yeah, sure. I met him at the APC. I've spoke to him quite a bit, and he's very smart. Like, he's extremely smart. He has his own way of seeing the sports, and he has huge, like, very good results. So, like, is another way of practicing as all the sports. Like, if every coach did the same thing, like, coaching will be useless, I guess.
Yeah, and I think that's the really exciting part about it, is there still remains optimizations and refinements to be made. And actually, like, one of the things which I taught myself largely during my career was Microsoft Excel, because I realized that I have questions and that my staff have questions and curiosities which are like literally keeping us up at night. Like, how can we get better at what we do? And you need a certain level of computer proficiency in order to organize the data in a way that you can understand it and then make better decisions off of it.
Sure.
And so like these more advanced questions, I like, again, going into the strength and conditioning world, I met with the director of the Canadian Sport Institute for Strength and Conditioning. The Canadian Sport Institute trains the Olympians winter and summer here in Canada. And I was fortunate enough to meet with him in November. And he told me a little bit about how the Strength and Conditioning Department of Canada monitors our Olympic level athletes, like the monitoring of them. And it was super inspiring for me, obviously, because this is very high level stuff. And I decided then that, wow, like there's a part of powerlifting that we haven't explored yet. We haven't looked at monitoring our athletes like the Olympians are monitored. And while we don't have all the equipment that they do, through our own means of Excel and all that, we can create the surveys and we can collate the data and we can look at things. We can take an honest, good look at things and make even more informed decisions off of it, right? So the latest thing that we've been looking at is athlete readiness and creating that into scores. We've been looking at what's called internal workloads. So an example of quadrant 1 analysis for us, and I will literally, we have 4 quadrants, right? Quadrant 1, this is the research of Dr. Tim Gabbett, who's kind of revolutionizing how we view load management in athletes. It's really exciting. I'll share it with you in a minute. But
yeah.
Quadrant 1 is external workloads. So this is volume, intensity, like what did I do? Quadrant 2 is internal workloads. So this is how many minutes did you train times what was the RP of that session. That gives me an arbitrary number. Let's say 900 is the arbitrary number. Yeah. That'd be a pretty hard session, right? So this gives me an idea of internally, how hard was that session to you?
Okay.
And then you can calculate some other things in that, like training monotony, which is the standard deviation between the 900, 600, 0, 600, 900, 0, 0. That's a week of training. Yeah. It's the standard deviation between that. And you get a score, right? And the research of Dr. Tim Gabbett shows that in Australian rugby players, a score over 1.1 correlates with higher injury risks. Okay, so we try to keep the monotony below 1. And usually for most of our programs, it's somewhere in the 0.9 range, right? So it's quite low. And then by multiplying the sum of the loads, so 900, 600, 0, 0, 600, 900, by the monotony, we get what's called strain. So strain takes into consideration the variation of your training. Yeah. And also how much training you did. And so we're looking at quadrant 1, external workloads, so volume, intensity, versus strain, monotony, and sessional workloads. And so let's say you had a really high volume, but it was really easy, low sessional load, adaptation, right? Like we know that we're adapting, we can continue going forward. If you have a really low volume and it was supposed to be an easy week of training, but a really high sessional load, maybe we're looking at maladaptation. So maybe we have to pivot away or stop, right? So now we're monitoring training like this. And then the next thing that we'll look at is your readiness and your well-being. So we're monitoring sleep, hydration, energy levels, stress, and soreness. And so, like, let's say that you have a high internal workload, but your readiness was crap. Like you were sleeping 3 to 4 hours a night and dehydrated when you were training and all that. It's like, okay, well, that's why. It's troubleshooting. Sure. And then the last thing is our performances with our AMRAPs. So now we're looking at the data. We've organized it into 4 quadrants. This is Dr. Tim Gabbett's research, and which is what it's a derivation of what Matt Jordan uses at the Canadian Sport Institute. We've organized it for powerlifting, and this is how we were making decisions.
This is very, very, very cool. because like you can see the reason why something happens, because as you said, like in quadrant number 2, you see maybe you're not physically recovering this good, but like outside of the gym everything is very bad, like you don't sleep enough, you don't drink enough, everything. So maybe just fixing your habits outside of the gym will make you able to do that workload. But otherwise, like if outside of the gym everything is perfect, but in the gym it's not, maybe it's the volume the problem. So it's very interesting. Also the fact like the internal load, you can predict, like you can avoid a lot of injuries like this.
Yeah.
Because if your athlete feels very bad, then you should fix it.
We hope, yeah. I think another frontier was I underwent a private education with Pro Sturgeon, who's also at the National Sporting Institute, basically Canadian Sport Institute. And his role is as the director of video analysis and biomechanics for all the athletes. And we brought him here, and we spent 4 hours talking about how can we do video analysis for powerlifting. And Taylor Atwood posted about this on his Instagram this past week, what we're looking for in the final weeks of his prep. Hip shift in the squat. You need a specific video angle to see that, right? And when you get a very specific video angle, I could then put it into Dartfish and I could actually measure exactly how much his hips are shifting from day to day, right? And so these are other things that we're looking at also that are coming down the pipeline. So basically it's to say that, like, you know, there are different ways to go about this, and there's still so much left to be discovered, which is exciting.
Sure. And I've seen a couple, like, we'll wrap it up soon because we went over 1 hour, but it was like, I'm very interesting. So I keep asking things, but quite a bit of coaches here in Italy, especially one of my friends that's writing an article for my website right now about heart rate and how to see if your SNC, is it the way you say it in English? CNS in English. Sorry, CNS is fully recovered or not, based on like basic. I don't know how to say, like the heart rate when you're like laying down, when you're resting heart rate and all those stuff. And also that could be very interesting, but you need much more like stuff to measure it.
Yeah,
is a bit trickier for a coach.
It's very intensive. I've never actually done much work with HRV, but I know Professor Mike T. Nelson has. I think, actually, I don't want to say that. I don't know if he has. Mike T. Nelson, I know, has done it. And if you look up de novo elements, heart rate variability, I know that you'll find information on it. There's really cool systems which like professional sports teams are using now called, I don't know if Morphus does it, but I know that Omega Wave does it, where like you are looking at like impulses in the brain, you know, heart rate variability, and a daily readiness calculator in order to basically give you a score out of 100 and how ready you are to train in that day. I think that's more applicable to team sports where there's like multiple different kinds of training. Like in powerlifting, we only have strength training.
Yeah. And also there's more money behind it, because if you have to measure all that stuff.
Yeah, like if you are FC Barcelona and you are monitoring like Lionel Messi, you would obviously want to know whether like he's at a risk to, you know, practice today and train tomorrow, and you would want to advise carefully, you know. But like with powerlifting, it's only strength training. Like I think that a readiness monitoring will take you far enough. You don't need to do HRV and all that.
Yeah, sure. And also another thing that I've seen some people in Italy use right now is tendo units or stuff to measure bar speed. And I never felt very attracted through that kind of stuff, because like speed, like we're doing strength, we're not doing power. So like speed is not the main factor for us. What do you think about it?
So it's tough because I wouldn't mind like having that data for attempt selection. I know that the U.S. national team, I guess assistant coach, the official coach is Susie Hartwig-Gary, but her husband, Matt Gary, who if you go to EPC this year, you'll see, he says that he would prefer to have tendo or velocity data on when selecting attempts. And I found that really interesting. Jordan Burke of Squats and Science is building the open barbell units, continuously innovating in that area, and trying to find a way to use it to predict the 1 rep maximum.
Yeah, Eric Helms showed us at the APC a study about it, like seeing like by the speed you have on a certain percentage of your 1 RM, then you can gauge what's your 1 RM. But yeah, I think it could be very useful for attempt on a midday, but I don't think like the thing that I wanted to say is I don't think like I should get as fast as I can. Like my aim should not be moving weight as fast as I can. Also, because I can see it on myself. If I try to be too fast, I misgroove the lift. So it's better being consistent and fast. Then if I have another way to gauge where my 1 RM is, very, very good. Like, but people tend to focus more on, okay, I did these meters per second. I'm trying to go faster next time. I don't think that will be very useful.
Yeah, it's tricky. Like it doesn't right now. It doesn't fit into the way we train, but in the future, I'm open to it. I think there's a lot there, and I know that like people like I could give your viewers and listeners more people to research, but Jordan Burke of Squat and Science in New York City, sometimes Taylor trains there. He's the inventor of the open barbell unit, which is a very affordable way to purchase and have access to velocity-based training. Yeah. He recently came out with an application to accompany it. Mladen Jovanovic, who is based in Croatia, has done some really cool blogs on his website, complementarytraining.net, on using basically profiling velocity and strength and the 1 rep maximum, projecting that. And I forgot the first name I mentioned. Oh, Matt Gary with the temp selection and velocity training. He finds it very to be very helpful for him. So those are the people I would look into for more on that.
Perfect. So closing it, where can people that follow me find you? I leave all the links to your Instagram, this Strength Guys Instagram and whatever down in the description. But if they want to chat with you or talk with you or like hire you, where they can find you?
Okay. So you can find us at the Strength Guys. And then like for me personally, I'm actually unable to take on more clients right now because otherwise I would probably be forgetting when people need programs and I would be doing a bad job. So I'm not able to take on clients right now. We have a few reservations for after the World Championship as well. So we're just holding those spots. But our coaches who are taking on clients are Dr. Brandon Roberts, Alfred Jong, Kedrick Kwan, and Chad Dolan, and John Downing. And I think Taylor Atwood, in special cases, can accommodate clients as well. And you can find more about us on thestrengthguys.com. So.
Okay, perfect. I leave all the links down in the description. So I thank you very much for being here with us and explain us all those things. I hope that this knowledge gets to the people that follow me, and that I'm pretty sure they appreciate it. I don't know how to say it right. And thank you. So
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me, and it was a really fun conversation. So
thank you. It was fun to listen to me speak very bad English.
oh, your English is good.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.